Good day and welcome to the Strong Ambition Podcast. I'm your host, Rylan Qualley, and I'm here to dive into what makes people ambitious and live an ambitious life. And we're going to talk about the training and nutrition mindset coming from a long journey with Mitch Calvert. And Mitch was someone who reached out to me when I joined a mastermind group for online trainers. And I posted my name, said where I was from. He's like, "Hey, I'm from Winnipeg too. If you ever want any chats, just let me know." And sure enough, he's helped me a lot. And we've gotten to become friends through the group. And he's been a very successful online coach. But what I love about his story, and it's different from so many others I see in the space, he doesn't come from being naturally lean or any of this coming easy to him. He came from being very overweight, worrying about, in his words, being a statistic, and transitioning his life to learn it, improve it, and now help so many others. He's got so many people in the city that he helps in the city of Winnipeg. And it's a terrific story. And I love hearing about people who struggle to get where they are and it didn't come natural, because there's a great value in the stories and lessons that they have that can help others. So without further ado, here is Mitch. Mitch, man, great to have you on the podcast. Such a pleasure. How are you today, sir?
I'm well. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate talking to a fellow Winnipegger. It's rare, right?
It is.
On the online space, it's comforting to have, some people in our little corner of the world that relate to what we're doing here, right?
Absolutely. And it was so nice because when I joined the VDM, the mastermind we're both in, you immediately mentioned, "Hey, yeah, I'm from Winnipeg too." And I was like, boom, okay, this is sweet. And you've been doing terrific in the space, and you've even helped me with a lot of the stuff that you're doing. And I loved it. So to give some context, so when I do my podcast, I always like people to tell their story. So I don't really do too much of a prequel introduction to who you are as a person. Very rough, just how I know you. I want you to tell your story. And I love your story because I think you got a terrific story. It's a big part of your brand. So why don't you tell the audience about yourself and how you got developed into the fitness space?
Yeah, it's definitely the unconventional route. Like if you were to talk to my 20-something self and say, "Hey, you're going to be a fitness coach in 3 to 5 years," I would have laughed you off the face of the planet, right? I was the heavy set, not particularly gifted athletically. 260 pounds was sort of that number I saw on the scale that really, made me take pause and say, "Okay, I've got to do something about this." But that wasn't until well after high school. I was working at Grapes Restaurant, may it rest in peace. It was a Winnipeg institution for a while there. And I would come home with, chicken fingers, fries after my shifts, stressed out shift for working at the line, and just eat myself silly playing video games, right? So getting obsessed with fitness at 260 pounds, leading me down this path to get in shape, was really the foundation for why I became a fitness coach eventually, right? Because you do so much legwork and research just on your own to help you lose that weight, that naturally it leads into looking into post-secondary options, right? Schooling to get certified and credentialized to offer this as a service. So it didn't happen right away. I went down the sports writing route and had a communications job for a few years, but I always moonlighted as a personal trainer. So back in 2012 is when I first built out a blog on the internet, talk about my journey. And so I started to pick up the odd client over those first few years and finally took the leap for good in early 2018, I believe. So 4 years running now, this has been my only thing. So that's it. That's the story in a nutshell.
Well, yeah, and you summarized it quick, but it is really, this is what I'm saying is my favorite part, because you didn't come a conventional route. You didn't come from a path that was easy. And that is, those are my favorite people to talk to. Like, is seeing it in this fitness space, how many people, I don't want to say that they had it's all easy for them genetically, but they have genetics that are going to lend themselves to a physique, and they work hard in fitness. So both of those are going to lend well. It's like if you're talented at a sport and you play that sport, it's going to lend itself well. And I see myself not as far of the spectrum that you came from, but similar to yourself in that it never came easy. And so what's even more important to me is that you actually came from a point where you weren't even really dedicated to it. You had to transition. And like you say, come from 260 pounds and then saying, I got to pivot this life, I think is such an important story for many people to hear. So what I would love to know, because that's the part of the summary I think you kind of leaped over, and I want you to really give me some sense of this path, because that's not an easy character change to be addicted to food and video games. So I would love to know, what was like some pivotal moments, what were some pivotal lessons for you along that way?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think you kind of liken it to, the best coaches in professional sports are generally the ones that weren't the gifted Wayne Gretzky's of the world, right? The grinders that had to learn the hard way and kind of eke out every inch of edge they could to make it. And that's sort of what my journey afforded me as well, because I can relate to now the people I work with who have a lot of weight to lose and bad habits that are really entrenched. So, I mean, short answer is the bad habits they don't necessarily disappear, right? You stack enough good ones on top of them that it's hard to get to them, but every once in a while it kind of resurfaces, and it's a constant daily battle even now. But over time, you just create a new identity for yourself through consistent habits, and now I would be way more stressed to miss the gym, not eat right, because I know how I feel when I don't do those things, that it's easy to stick out and do them, because of that transition that over time just became part of who I was. So pivotal moments you're talking, right? So the first couple triggers, high school gym class, one of those, I think I have one, those handheld body fat devices that we know have some issues, but it was new technology at the time. I'm dating myself a bit, but gym teacher brought that out as some sort of fitness test. And so publicly stating your body fat percentage made me want to, dig a hole in the gym floor and hide, because I think I had the worst score among the boys in the class at, close to 40%. I'm not sure how accurate it was, but it was high. So that was sort of like my first moment of, well, I should do something, but it didn't happen right away. I continued to struggle and push it off for the next week. And how that stupid human trick of procrastinating on things we know we should do. So the trigger was getting honest with myself when I saw 260 on that scale that morning, and like straight up looking in the mirror and saying, you're done doing this, because you're going to become a statistic, right? Where, I knew enough even at that point that obesity was not the path I wanted to go down. So the pain of staying the same outweighed the pain of change. And that sort of was the trigger point to get a gym membership, to enlist a few coaches along the way, and just kind of figure out this process over time through the ups and downs.
Some real powerful words there that you used, especially the statistic one. And I remember you saying that on my Instagram live, and I really think that it's interesting how certain language in our mind, we just say it to ourselves and that resonates. It just, okay, like this has to be different. And I think people should really pay attention to that. Like, don't be afraid to question yourself and to question your actions, because you're going to just say the right word at the right time. And saying the word statistic to you is like, I could just fall in line there. Like, it's a probability that I would. And what I usually tell people is that, no different than what you had mentioned, like there was a pain point there where you're certainly dealing with pain anytime you're not happy with your physique and your fitness. You're certainly, you deal with what I call micro trauma of like, dissatisfaction with who you are and how you're living your life. But then these extra triggers hit along the way. And then I say, like, for some people, it can basically build up like gunpowder. And no different than someone who has kind of a bad knee, they're gonna have one point where they jump on it, they twist and turn on it, and it goes. And that's what that word statistic did for you. And I think that's a really magical thing, because like people need those. Like sometimes the trigger has to be a goddamn heart attack. And that's actually quite often for some people. I've heard stats, and I'm not sure if this is a real stat. I've just heard that sometimes people have to nearly die up to 3 times for it to make a big impact. And I think it's just valuable that you even were aware that you knew that things had to change. And that's if you remember the transformation thing, and it's like there's pre-contemplation where no one wants to change anything, and then contemplation. And sitting in that contemplation phase is where most people are sitting, most people in the world. Like, and probably when, because we're pretty close to the same age. I think you're a bit older than me, right? How old are you, Mitch?
36. Yeah.
36. Yeah. So I'm 34. So like right around when we were in high school, like fitness testing was kind of a thing, training was kind of a thing. And now it's like to see like high school kids doing weight training isn't crazy. And it's now seen as a necessity for life and fitness. So I think most people are sitting in pre-contemplation. Now, I want to come back to this other words that you use was stacking habits to get rid of the bad ones. And I really love that framework. So what were some habits that you stacked that kept pushing you towards this character evolution?
Yeah. So if I go back to the really early days, it was just getting outside for a walk, and a walk progressed to maybe a slight jog, walk, kind of, and, stacked up kind of like circuits, intervals, and then just getting progressively stronger, with that. And then eventually transitioning to the gym, because you get more comfortable as you lose some weight, right? To venture into that space. So yeah, it's baby steps to some degree. But I think it also helped to have that trigger event of getting really honest and real with myself. And then I was really motivated to do as much as possible, right? Because too many people, I think, kind of sugarcoat where they're at. And, self-love, self-care is kind of a buzzword right now. And you kind of, bury your head in the sand. But if your BMI is over 30 and you feel miserable and you get out of breath going up a flight of stairs, like those are all telltale signs that you should do something now, right? Not waiting for a cataclysmic event to happen to force you to change. And so I'm thankful I did, because, many people don't. And then unfortunately it becomes too late, right?
Totally true that we have this kind of funny yin and yang that we're trying to play around with self-love and self-care and self-critiquing. And I started to help people by stop saying that the self-critic is an asshole, but it's going to be an asshole if you only let it think it's an asshole. And I said that be friends with your self-critic, be friends with that person, because you can go in the mirror every single day of your life and say, I am discontent with this. And that doesn't mean you hate yourself. But if you go into the mirror and you say, I hate this, and then you're going to ignore that self-critic because you end up enemies with it, end up enemies with a part of yourself, then you are burying your head in the sand, and you're not so much working on self-love. You're working on ignorance. You're working on not paying attention to where you could be, and you're going to ignore these signs and like all those signs of like aches and pains, like your body's telling you things. And I think it's a really difficult thing to describe. I've had someone on here and we talked about like the Hayes movement, healthy body at every size. And I don't think it's healthy at every size, because you can't be healthy if you have no physical capacity. You can't tell me that that's necessarily healthy. Now, I'll say happy at any size. And if a person is honestly BMI overweight, and they're living life, and in their cognitive mind, they honestly could test as just being happy, that is beyond our skills, right? But
yeah, for sure.
But the probability is that if you don't have a physical capacity that you want, then you desire, you don't have the satisfaction with your physical, not even to be stage ready by any means, but just being content with looking at yourself in the mirror, being content with what you're capable of. And we all know food digests in a way to make you feel better or worse, that it's fair to say that you're probably not as happy as you could be. Now, what healthy and happy looks like for you as an individual, undefinable, and it should be your journey and it should be your life's mission to try to discover that, right? So I also want to come back on one thing you said that I think is so important for people who are coming from far end of the spectrum, and I get so excited and they say walking. Like, hey, it's that simple. That's the lowest barrier to entry, and then you need to walk, jog. Yes, absolutely, walk, jog. Don't think you have to run for time on end if you hate running as it is. And then you get that momentum, and those things are really pivotal. What would you say? Because, how many years did it really take for you to feel like I'm on this path and I'm proud of where I'm at? Where did you get that stage? And what were some struggling moments for you that you had to overcome?
Yeah, it wasn't a straight line to success. I mean, it's kind of hard to remember the exact timelines, but I went through a lot of different approaches, the burn the fat, feed the muscle, Tom Venuto. That was a pretty good one because it was more about eating whole foods, frequent meals, and pairing it with strength training. I didn't get to that one right away. Unfortunately, I went down a few different paths where I thought running was the answer, and I did a half marathon at one point, having lost a fair bit of weight, but I was skinny fat and I rebounded bad after I stopped running. Like I gained back 30 pounds I had lost. So that was failure number one, was kind of that rebound effect, that I wasn't really changing my nutrition. I was relying on a lot of exercise. And when that stopped, it wasn't sustainable. So then, I went down the keto road before it was cool, before it was keto even, I think, and ended up with a bowel obstruction. So I was in the ER. I didn't poop for 3-4 days, TMI. And so that required some beefed up Imodium pill to fix. So I knew that wasn't the method to go with. Now they pair it with more fiber, so they know better. But it really was just finding that balance and the strength training, right? I think that's what really gave me the foundation, that I didn't have to, cut calories forever to get where I wanted to go. You actually want, muscle's half the equation to tone and build that physique most people aspire to achieve, and they overlook that part. They think it's just a weight loss gain, right? I'll lose 30 pounds, I'll get where I want to go. And then they realize, well, you want some well-placed muscle on your frame, regardless of gender too. So yeah, 2-year timeline of figuring things out, getting a coach near the tail end. Skip Hill is kind of a bodybuilder, but he really showed me how to hit sufficient protein numbers and, have carbs around workouts and really nail down my calories and know exactly how much I should be consuming to lose, maintain, or gain. That was sort of the foundation. Because after that, there was no turning back. I kind of knew what I needed to do. It was just about being consistent with it.
Yeah, the biggest statement right there is what people really miss so much. I think, even myself, it took me years to understand what consistency is for individuals, including myself. Like I would always say I'm consistent for strength training for quite some time. So once you can get that in as one of those habits you stack, it's already going to be such a big rock for your life. And protein, those are my, like, if people say I need to work on 2 habits, what nutrition habit and what physical habit, I say strength training and protein. And that's going to take care of so much, because strength training is extremely efficient for time spent for the physiological benefits, and protein feeds that. Plus protein satiates you and gives you amino acids, and a lot of meat comes with vitamins and minerals. So from there, though, it's the consistency of, like you had said, like you need to stack. I like how you said that, stack good habits. So it's really hard to do the other stuff. You're busy in the day. If you're going for walks 3 times a day, you're too oriented around, I need to go to sleep because that's a good habit I have. I don't have time to stay up and watch TV and eat food, right? So I really love how you come through those things and you end up, hey, it's consistency. And I get that it's so boring and it doesn't sound like you have a secret, because there isn't. But I think what I try to really pull from people is, what are the pivot points? Because everyone's going to have a different epiphany moment, right? Everyone's going to have like, oh, I didn't think of it that way until I experienced it. And so like I would argue, and I would like to hear your view of it, possibly some of the ones that for you was the strength training and probably even getting the coach for structure. Would you say that was probably one of those epiphany things for you?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I was sort of chasing my tail, getting sucked in by every shiny object before the coach, and I'd see something new and I would think that would be the shortcut, right? Like I said, I went through the keto, I went through running, went through different dietary approaches in between, and bought all the supplements and wasted a lot of money on things that, don't really move the needle. So getting the coach kind of helped narrow my focus down to what really matters, and having that accountability of the check-ins and the honesty that brings really got me over the hump. Because otherwise it was like, go hard for 2 weeks, fizzle out, lose some weight, gain it back. And that vicious cycle so many people get into, right, where they kind of chase the short-term solutions and don't ever develop the long-term habits and foundation to sustain. Sustain is key. So yeah, Ken really helped me kind of, and I think it was like a 6-month program too. So week after week having to show up and check in. And if you don't have anything to show for it, then obviously that's on you. But, having someone else in your corner to pull you up when you fall down was, a game changer for me, which is why I understand my role too is more about implementation than information. As you can attest, is getting people to be consistent and implement over a long enough timeline is really the key. The secrets are secondary to all that.
Yeah, I actually really love that. I had Jason Brooks, he's a performance psychologist, kind of give me a better word for what we really need. Accountability is a part of it. Accountability is kind of the structure. I'm supposed to be here and do this and that. But was even more pivotal is when he said, you're actually looking for support. And I never actually it didn't resonate with me until he said this. Like, yeah, I want to know that someone's beside me, right? I mean, I want to know that when I say, man, today was a tough day, someone says, yeah, it is. And I can tell you just from when I had done my first bodybuilding show and I had my old mentor, AJ, I would message him and be like, man, I feel almost like sick. Like I got the flu. He's like, no, that's normal. Yeah, it's tough. Take some naps. And we could bounce ideas off each other and, refeeds and stuff. And then when I did it like 2 years later, I tried to prep for a show. Now this was during COVID, so it ended up getting like pushed off so much. I just pulled out, but I also was doing horrible and I had no one to talk to. So I would vent to my girlfriend and I could vent. So she kind of supported, but I didn't have real support of someone who'd been through the path and been through the trials and tribulations, be like, no, you're on the right way. And that's all you really need sometimes, right? And to be like, no, this is the model, you're doing the right thing, because that consistency and sustainability and all those really fucking boring words need someone to say, trust, this formula works. And I always tell people, you got to go through this assumption phase. You go through the assumption phase where all of this stuff is going to line up and it's going to create, this chemical reaction in your body. And one day you're going to look in the mirror and like, I don't recognize that person. That's amazing. But it's like watching water evaporate. You know what's going to happen, but it's super fucking boring. So I really love that you had that resonation. And so I would like to come from your view now, how you practice with your clients. And you're very successful in Winnipeg, and you've had quite an outreach with the online space, being in the space for so long. I would like to have an idea, what you're willing to share with us, of like, I'm assuming based on what you said, you take a long-term approach. So you don't try to tell someone, hey, you're going to lose weight in like 30 days or 60 days, but do you usually always try to work people into more of a 12-month formula?
Yeah, I mean, we like to promise a certain result in the initial fat loss phase, whether that's 90 days or more. 2 sizes for the ladies in particular, a couple of belt notches for the men. So we do, when they're motivation side, we do focus in on expediting some fat loss in a way that they come into it and they realize, oh, this is more food than I expected. And those are all good things we want. But every step of that process, we're slowly convincing them that this is the long game and it's not about a 90-day result. And then you go back to your old habits because they're just going to gain it back and it was a waste of your time, effort, and money. So having a bit of a maintenance phase, we talk about, somewhere to go from there, which acts as an exit strategy from the diet. And so many people overlook that, right? That you don't need to be dieting all the time, but if you don't take that long game approach where you have somewhere to maintain eventually and have some foundational habits built. Like every Sunday we have them rate themselves, on a score of 7, how many days did you hit this habit? Water, steps, X number of strength workouts, their nutrition, which we just boil down to a calorie and protein goal each day, as long as they're in range of that, and your sleep. You do those 5 things, you're scoring 80%, you'll get the outcome you want optimally. And if, you're scoring 3s and 4s, we know what to adjust. going forward each week. So anytime they try to look at something out there in the interwebs, we bring back down to those 5. Okay, this is where you can improve. Let's address that first before doing anything stupid. And sure enough, in most cases, that breaks the plateau. Right. So the basics work best, as you understand.
Yeah, and it's really like it's boring, but they work best. And especially how much some people just get terrified by the word calorie counting. And people want to hear something else. And it's such a, because of those things like keto and all these other strategies and things like that. And on top of that, it is a really difficult thing to think of, and to some degree, if you're not used to it. It's like, I have to do this every day. And then once you do it, you're like, oh, apps are really easy. And so it's one of these like big humps that you think it's going to be way worse than it is. Kind of like getting into the gym and doing strength training. Like it's one of these humps that like can, again, be such a game changer for you, because you'll realize it's a skill. And you're also like teaching yourself what that food feels like, right? Like people are just I didn't even know until my one client just recently had mentioned, he's like, yeah, I had a treat meal and I enjoyed a DQ Blizzard. I had a Reese's Pieces and it was the lowest calories. So I was like, really? Reese's Pieces? And he's like, yeah, that was 1,000 calories and it was the lowest.
Oh yeah, those are diet killers for sure. Everyone's surprised by the DQ stuff.
Well, and I'm just amazed that it was Reese's Pieces. And again, like that's a fair, like simple assumption thing that most people I even talk to is like, would you think Reese's Pieces would be the lowest? No. And like, that's again, why calories are actually helpful, because you might find something out that has less in it that you thought, or more in it that you didn't think it would. And so that's why I say calorie counting is an education piece, right? And then you come back to this maintenance thing. And I love that, because I think, I honestly didn't even really hear about diet breaks until the last couple of years, when people were talking about diet breaks. You have 100 different words for it. I mean, that's always what the whole cheat day was about, or cheat meal. It's actually a refeed. So you get your body relaxed and you recover better. Do you have any kind of specifics that you give them on that? Or do you kind of say, hey, if you have at least, maybe one day a week where you're hitting maintenance, or, most of the days deficit, like, do you educate them on that within their initial fat loss? Or do you get them to just kind of dedicate a month to the maintenance and predominantly try to have deficits?
Yeah, it's sort of an individualized answer, right? Everyone's at a different stage when we determine that. But we generally have one weekend day a week that's considered a maintenance free space on the bingo card, right? Don't go completely ham and blow your numbers, but this is what your maintenance calories should be. Feel free to eat a meal out that kind of gets you there. And then you just get back on the wagon the next day. And it's built to kind of give you a refeed, I guess, for lack of a better word, and more of a mental, psychological break from dieting. And we introduce that pretty early on and try to maintain it as long as we can, unless they really hit a sticking point, right? So it kind of makes dieting a little bit easier, knowing that it's not that you don't have such structure each day, a little bit of flexibility in a controlled manner, one weekend night a week helps, I think, with adherence the rest of the time. And then, maintenance could be a whole block of time. Eventually, someone's that's lost 20% of their body weight needs to kind of come out of a calorie deficit and reset their metabolism some. And that's where we would gradually play with increasing calories up to what we would think is their maintenance threshold. And we kind of play it by ear, just like you do play it by ear in a fat loss phase, is assess their scale weight measurements, pictures every couple of weeks, and continue to increase until we get to a place where it stabilizes some for them. And then you focus on different goals in that phase, right? Strength training, you've got more calories to play with. You can do more in the weight room. You focus in on personal best, toning, I guess. I like to come back to that word, looking at muscle more as a priority, that kind of stuff. So I enjoy that time more, but clients have a harder time with it because it's less scale fixated and more about what's next.
Yeah, and I think what I really try to encourage people with maintenance is to understand that, like you'd say, all those benefits are there physiologically, less chance of adaptation, right? You're likely to lose, you could lose some muscle mass, minimal if you're getting good sleep and everything's well balanced, but you minimize it even more if you have those diet breaks even once or twice a week, and then you can really rebound from it physiologically after a week or two of the maintenance phase. But what I actually really encourage people to recognize about it is, do you know the right amount of calories and what it feels like? Like, that is something that when you've been yo-yo dieting, you only know two things: how to give a fuck and starve yourself, and
Mhm.
I don't give a fuck, so I'm getting full. And that's no behavior that you want to sustain, but that's what you've been sustaining, and that's what I was doing for years and years. It was, I know how to be in a deficit and what that feels like. I hate it, but I'll do it. And then it's like, okay, well, I don't have to do that. It's like, when do you ever toe the line? And the biggest thing that I say whenever you look at, like, there are definitely genetically um, people who genetically will have a disposition to hold lighter body weight and to sustain lighter body weight with ease. Some people will even have lighter body weight and have muscle mass. But both of those people have one thing in common in comparison to those who have a hard time, is that they intuitively have developed an appetite that is appropriate to their body weight and size. And I would argue the people who are leaner, who don't have a lot of muscle mass, even more so. But it's not just like, I think you have a physiological component that develops young in age, and then it's environmental. Because if you spend your whole life worried about your weight and doing yo-yo dieting, when do you get to understand your appetite and where it should be? And so that's why I say your maintenance is your practice. Your maintenance should be like, oh, this is full. And
Mhm.
you know, when you practice that more and more, and then not to mention like kind of the steady approach of deficit rather than a severe deficit, you might not even hate the feeling of a deficit. And I really kind of explain to people that this is, I call it the ebbs and flow model, which is, it's just my language. But I say that life has ebbs and flows. You're going to have days that are probably a calorie surplus because you are having a family vacation. And then, and you could be at your ideal body weight. Well, guess what? I imagine you're going to want to have a subtle, comfortable deficit the next week. Just because you're at your ideal body weight doesn't mean you don't ever need to hit that again. So you need that skill and then to go back into maintenance. And so this is the ebbs and flows in life. And you need to understand a deficit, a maintenance, and a surplus all under feel alone, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's great that you fit that in there. And like I totally know what you mean. You have to get them to mentally be comfortable with it, but they need to respect why it's mentally valuable. And you can look at it as a long play game. And you could even make an argument that there might be subtle fat loss if you're doing a novel amount of muscle gaining, right? If you increase your volume and you have good protein and you're going for those PRs, you could make an argument that maybe fat loss still could be there, but it's just so much more valuable for all those other things. So I really like that. Now, I'd love to know from your perspective, because you've been on such a journey in fat loss and training currently for yourself. Are you, and you even said like you have things you're currently struggling with. I certainly do. What kind of ambitions do you have now with your training that you're trying to understand and learn about yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question because I've certainly changed my approach north of 35. I don't know if it's 35 right on the button. Like, that's it. No more heavy deadlifts. I still like to train heavy, but I tend to make little better choices when it comes to exercise selection. I just don't love how back squats do to my knees. And I like to play hockey recreationally once a week. So that would always kind of sabotage that. So now I can do plenty with landmine squats, single leg work, still get all the stimulus I need without that beat up knees feeling. So for me personally, back squats are out for the most part. So I've evolved over time in how I approach the gym, and I do it in a bit of a smarter way, we'll say, to minimize the strain on my joints. And I feel healthier than I ever have in terms of workouts. So ambitions wise, I guess it's just kind of staying where I'm at, continuing to build some strength and change my physique gradually over time. But nothing too extreme in either direction, right? I'm all about efficiency now with my workouts. I work out at home. I can't even really justify the commute somewhere and the added time to my day that doesn't afford me now with two kids. So I have plenty of equipment here. That's the nice thing about write-offs. So basically I have a full gym here anyway. But that barrier to drive somewhere and shower off and all that is no longer part of the equation. So I try to get that done in an hour at most, right? Really be time efficient with it. So there's that piece. Diet wise, it kind of depends. I still go through like mini fat loss phases when I feel like I'm getting too fluffy or there's an occasion coming up, right? I know what to do to get back into a deficit. But for the most part, maintenance calories, not looking to put on a ton of size anymore. I've been down that road, many times, and it's not really a desire of mine anymore. So I'm okay with that. I've accepted that. And I love training. I just love the going to battle with the weight, so to speak. So it's going to be part of what I do forever. It's just at different times, it's less focused on outcomes and more just the habit of doing it, right?
Totally. And the idea of finding that longevity model, right? And that's where you say smarter, and it's really just, it's what fits you. And you don't, it's always this unfortunate song and dance that we have in training of the no pain, no gain. And I mean, the people who are screaming it now are going to be in so much pain in 10 years. Right. And the big thing I love hearing from individuals like yourself is that, hey, you know what, like fitness comes at many levels, and this is how my fitness is making me feel better. I take weight off and I feel better, and it fits your lifestyle. Like that's the important thing, especially having kids. You're looking at that longevity because you want to be able to run and move around with your kids and play hockey, and the hockey alone, like that's a valuable piece, very valuable piece. That was a huge ego shot to me in my routine last year because I was goaltending, and I hadn't goaltended in like 10 years consistently. Well, push, pull, squat, hinge, all my normal movements are all forward and backwards, no lateral movements. I couldn't even raise my glove hand like I used to. It used to be like I used to have a great glove. I couldn't even move it. And so I had to completely change my training. And again, it was like, okay, you know what, smarter, think about this. It's not about you being sore. You can't afford to be sore. As a matter of fact, I just completely revamped my training so I would never do a leg day within 2 to 3 days prior. Yeah. And sometimes I would accept somebody, hey, you want to fill in for me? And if I'd done leg day, I'm like, no more. Like I just couldn't because I could show up, but I would not show up physically, and my ego would just take a shot because I could not move at all.
Yeah, I've been there in hockey, for sure.
Yeah. And it's so frustrating, right? Because it's not fun then, right? Because you're trying to have fun with the sport. You're trying to enjoy the sport, and that's where you get your intrinsic motivation from. I really recommend, you might enjoy, do you ever follow Joe DeFranco?
I do, yeah.
He's got so many longevity style workouts, and I think that's where I'd like when I give up the barbell, which I'm not necessarily going to give it up entirely, but I'm currently on my own mission to hit some PRs and try a powerlifting meet. But what he has a great picture of is like, okay, well, what about body weight relative things? And getting great at them. What about really taxing things with like all the stuff that you had said and getting great at that? Hey, that's still taxing your body and challenging your body, but more for what is, I kind of say healthier for the joint because it's just more sustainable. And I love that. So you have a clear picture there, and I think that's amazing. Is there anything else that you're most currently really ambitious about? It doesn't have to be training or nutrition. What are you really excited about coming down the pipeline?
Yeah, it's funny now. I have 2 daughters that grew up really fast, right? And 6, almost 7, and 4 now. So I've structured my life around being around for them after 5. And as a conventional personal trainer, that wasn't a reality, right? You do all the night shifts, split shifts, and all that kind of stuff. So I've really built this business to help a lot of people at scale, but also give me the freedom to have that quality time. So that's what I'm most proud of now, is the balance I've created in my life. Not to say it doesn't always go in one direction. Sometimes you got to just double down on growing your business, and some things get, sacrificed temporarily. But right now where I'm at is comfortable with where the business is, helping a lot of people. And we've got over 180 members now. And not everyone, but most of them getting great results and really feel a positive impact from what we're doing. And also feeling like a present father with a fairly fit body, and the balance I've created. It took a long time to get here. It's often been skewed in different directions, but that's honestly what I'm most proud of these days, is just the happiness quotient I've developed for myself, trying to keep it there without getting lost in the weeds.
It's a beautiful thing, man. Yeah, I've said this for a long time, that the three biggest things that define a character of a person in their life: what you're going to do, who's beside you when you do it, and who do you show how it's done. And that third piece is by far the most definitive way that you leave some sort of legacy in your life. So it doesn't even matter what you do nearly as much as showing someone how you're doing it. So if you get absorbed into work and stuff like that, well, that's no way to show someone how to help someone live life. But you're taking that, and every time I hear fathers say, like, I have to be there for my kids, I just admire it so much, because I mean, especially when you look at the working class father of 40, 50 years ago, that was not the case. And so I think it's a beautiful thing. And it is a beautiful thing to have the online training, that you have these things. And at the end of the day, you're going to sacrifice sometimes, but most of the time you get to really both. It's so cool how much you help your clients, and it can complement your life. And it's the first time that personal training can actually do that to this extent. So it's a great time. And I really appreciate your time here, Mitch. I think I'll have you on one other time, in a year or so, and we'll hear more stories from you, and we'll shoot the shit more about nutrition and training, and see anything else comes down the pipeline. But I really appreciate your time, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Ron. Appreciate the opportunity. It was nice to chat with you. We'll see you on the 8th.
You got it. Thank you, Mitch. I really appreciate that. That story was tremendous, because again, it's not about someone who had it easy, but he had to work for it. He had to change who he was. I don't know if it gets much harder than changing your identity, right? Changing who you are, changing your feelings and your emotions towards your actions and behaviors every day. He came from, doing all of the easy things, and then he chose a harder path. I also think it's very important that he talked about how simple he made it. Start walking and jogging. And then, he went after something like a half marathon. But then he also mentioned the ebbs and flows. He mentioned that it wasn't linear. And what I think is really important about that is, like, he went through all these other different systems. He did the keto, all that stuff. And he kept trying. And there's something he didn't really talk about, but I think I have to shed light on. And I know from my perspective and anyone's perspective who makes their life different from where they originally are: belief, complete, total belief in themselves. Belief that I don't have to deal with this pain. Belief that I can change who I am in the end. And that doesn't come natural to everyone. It really doesn't. It's actually way easier to follow what is considered realistic. Realistic is your reality based on what you're normally used to, what you're normally influenced by. So if you surround yourself with people who don't exercise, who don't eat well, who aren't very active, and don't believe in that lifestyle at all, it's going to be normal for you to not believe that you can do it, to not believe that you can change your routine behaviors, not to mention believe in yourself, right? Like, have you challenged yourself to do something you haven't done before? So now all of your reality is making you not believe in yourself. But what's so important for Mitch is that whatever caused him to say, I'm going to keep believing in myself, I'm going to try something new. And this is why I always love speaking to yo-yo dieters, people who've been on and off, people who have, binge eat to going into deficits, all this stuff, is because you believe that you want to do better, but you just don't have the path to walk. And so as long as you believe, you can get it. And if you only believe to a realistic extent, if you only believe in a reality around you that is normal, remember that normal isn't in good shape. Most people are not fit. Most people are not training much. Most people are not eating well. So the norm isn't a good standard. Be abnormal. Think beyond. Think beyond mediocrity. And when you do that, you give yourself the ability to, no matter what happens, come back and try again. Success ain't going to be linear, but you're going to have these moments, these epiphanies, and it's going to shape who you are when you start to see that process. And I'm not going to lie, I know it sounds boring when it comes to the habits of stepping and sleep and tracking calories and all that stuff. No, what's important to know that there is details there to shed light on. Those are the main points. But how those points work for you as an individual, that's where there is some specialty, and that's where coaching helps. When you let's look at like a high level skill, right? So boxing, a jab cross. Someone says, hey, learn a jab cross. Oh, you could YouTube it, learn how to do a jab cross. If there's not someone there to assess it for you, unless it comes to you naturally, and not to mention, that doesn't mean you're actually going to be good in front of an individual and they actually try to punch you in boxing. It's hard for that detail to be nuanced to you and how it works for you. So just to come back to the calories and the lifestyle and the training, the how for you as an individual is where the support from a coach can really come a long way. So I don't care if it's me, I don't care or it's Mitch, or if it's someone that you know and trust that has some familiarity with this. The support really makes it just, I'm going to say, easier and quicker. Rather than going up and down, trust someone, trust the process, because you're eventually going to need to live a process. That's what it is. The process is a result. Ryan Savage. Always love that quote. But I hope you learned a lot from this in terms of, appreciating what people can go through and get that end result with, compliance and consistency and understanding that those rocks are kind of true across the board. Sleep, walking, training, protein, all those things that I talk about, they're true across the board. And the detail, how it fits your life, that's what you got to work out. You are going to need to put in some work, and you got to change your identity to do so. So with that being said, we're looking at how much you got to enjoy that lifestyle that you're going to try to travel towards. And because of that, we know we're not just pursuing happiness. We're going to find the happiness within the pursuit. Check you next time. Thanks for joining.